has committed to giving South Africa more than 12 billion rands to phase out coal energy. But while environmentalists have lauded the plans, not everyone's happy with the idea. Shutting down coal-powered stations would mean the loss of thousands of jobs. NUM Deputy General Secretary William Mabapa and Sian Energy CEO Mohamed Madhi join us now to discuss this. A very good evening to you both. Mr. Mabapa, I'm going to start off with you. Obviously, it's understandable the concerns of the loss of jobs because they'll be in the thousands, with people relying on working at coal power stations. But then if the idea or the call or the rather advice is to move to greener energy, what then would you say is a better solution that will not affect people's jobs?
Yeah, I think we understand the issues of the climate change, and then we support the issues of the climate change. And we are hopeful that when we move towards the transition, we will move on a transition that is taking care that there are people that are currently working in the power stations and the mining that are supplying the power stations. And in doing that, we must do it very responsibly, that the transition does not create or increase the current unemployment. And then if we do it that way, I will expect that we will then we'll be taking care that we are not just reckless, we are just doing it for the sake of doing it, and then we don't care as to whether the workers that are currently working on the coal mines are getting the job. But one of the critical issues is that we also further encourage the issue of technology, that it has been proven that there is a technology that can be applied both at the power stations and at the coal to mitigate the current pollution that both the coal mines are doing and the power stations are doing. For example, in the power stations, you can then trap the emissions that the power stations are emitting with that technology. And that clearly tells us that we can mitigate. You know, the problem is when people come and expect us to accept anything that they bring, and when you say that, no, it's fine, we understand, but here are the power stations, what do you want us to do with this power station? Because at least there is something that can be done, that you can still use the very same power stations, but at least you can trap the emissions. There is the coal, you can use the technology that when you mine, you don't pollute much of the environment. And what often becomes a problem to us is that those options seems to be options that are not taken very serious. Then to us, sometimes we believe that there are people that has got business and they're just only pushing their own business, that I only want a business that I'm involved in because I want that business to be there. And at the same time, those are the issues that we are saying, yes, for now, we can mitigate only the power stations that we have, only the coal mines that we have, but with the future, understanding that the new options that we will look, yes, most of them, they will be renewable energies. We don't dispute that fact, but we are saying, let us be responsible.
Mr. Madhi, now you're hearing, obviously, Mr. Mabapa here speaking about how the loss of jobs is the biggest concern, at least for the NUM, but that they do understand the need for climate change and for things to get better in terms of the environment. We've seen how the implementation, or rather the resolution of South Africa's energy crisis has essentially gone nowhere. It's gone at a snail's pace. We are still struggling with two power stations that were supposed to have been running by now a long time ago, and there's been a lot of, financial misappropriation along the way where South Africa's energy is concerned. So Mr. Mabapa is saying we understand that there needs to be climate change and that we are all for it, but then our people need to be protected, how then can we trust the government to make sure that the transition, to greener energy is still going to be fast enough, efficient enough, and still be able to protect the livelihoods of people who are working at the coal stations right now?
So I think, firstly, I must welcome what was said. It's I think a bit of a change from the position that I've been used to in the past. And I think it's quite a progressive statement coming out of the NUM. So I commend them on that. And I tend to agree, and I wouldn't have thought this, but I agree with quite substantially most of what he said. I think the areas that I would disagree, or not disagree, but I think what we need to understand is that in absolute terms, the number of jobs that will be created from green energy will be more than the current number of jobs in the coal industry. The amount of expenditure, capital expenditure, overall investment, etc., in green energy is going to far outweigh the money that is being spent, which is almost nothing now, on coal-fired power plants. So in absolute
when things
terms,
are done right, yes? I'm sorry to just jump in there. Just on your point, you're saying these things are the benefit.
Sure,
but obviously this is when things are done right.
But when they're done right, that's true. But the key point here, whether it's done right or not, and clearly we don't condone anything that's not done right, but the key point is that in absolute terms, the number of jobs created from going green is going to be a lot more than the number of jobs lost in coal. So what do we do about the coal jobs? Because we can't ignore those. Those are important. Now, one thing that has not been said, and no one has really sort of highlighted this sufficiently, in my opinion, the coal-fired power plants that we have, large portions of them, the steam generating turbines, those are useful. And it is the fuel that is the problem. It is the coal that is feeding those steam turbines that is the problem. What we need to do is find alternative sources of fuel to generate heat, to generate steam, to run those turbines. So those coal-fired power plants can be repurposed, and we need to phase out coal, and we need to do it smartly. So I agree with the member from NUM in terms of what he said, but we can't ignore the inevitability of what's going to happen. There's one further point that just needs to be noted here, and that is that we are going to an era and the age of decentralization. So, I was stunned when I heard the CEO of Eskom saying coal is still going to be around for 15 years. I'm not sure where, but certainly not in this country. Decentralization is going to be a key factor that's going to create independent power plants all over the country. Eskom's biggest clients, they may not yet realize this, but their biggest clients are all going to move to independent power plants. And that means the death knell of coal long before 10 years are up.
Mr. Mabapa, I would imagine you're hearing everything Mr. Madhi is saying. Obviously, the bigger takeouts from this is that, the job creation from green energy is going to be far better than the loss of jobs, from the coal stations. And of course, the other point that he's making is that the Eskom CEO himself is speaking about how coal will still be here for another decade and a half, and yet he doesn't really agree with that, saying that he doesn't know where, but it won't be in this country. So would you then perhaps say that the issue here, from an NUM point of view at least, or involving NUM, is that there is just not enough information coming from the right people to the NUM so that you guys can allay fears and put people's concerns to bed about the fact that when we do eventually move to green energy, that their jobs will still be there, and in fact, more jobs will be created? Mr. Mabapa, I can see you speaking to us, but unfortunately it looks like you're on mute.
Really tells you a lot, because if Eskom itself can talk a statement and then you get other people come and talk, that clearly tells you that there are people who are deciding about the sector, where Eskom is, where we are, but they don't engage us. So that is why we will talk in folk tongues, because they've got information that is for themselves. I will take it that if you are saving the interest of the people, and then you know that there is a plan, if that, I don't know whose plan is that, whether it's a private sector plan, whether it's a government sector plan, but whoever the plan is for, that person must call stakeholders that are involved in this sector and then show us that this is how we are planning to run the transition in this sector. Yes, we hear that there is expectations that there is going to be a lot of jobs, but to our understanding is that these processes of renewable energy, they are high technology areas. So most of the areas, there will not be many people working. If you look, for example, now, I give an example, you look at how coal employees are working. When you go to a coal mine, you can see the multitude of them being at the employment. You go to a power station, it becomes the same. But we understand that the technology that will then be applied in this renewable will not be the same. For example, he's talking about the turbines. So in most of the areas that we can currently see them, I've never seen, and I'm not saying that there is no, it's a matter of me being exposed. I've never seen a place where there are more than 20 turbines. And I will expect that when they even can be 20, I don't expect that they can be 20 people as if one person will work on that. I will expect that there is a technology that monitors them. If there will then be maintenance, it will be a once-off maintenance at a particular time for somebody to go and maintain them. So I will not dispute, because I'm not in the right space with the understanding that the Honorable is having. But I'm saying to him, you can talk to us. You know how you find me. You find me. I will challenge him that, please, as early as Monday, ask my contacts. Let us meet us. Show us how those jobs are going to be done. And we are leadership and very responsible leadership. If we can be convinced that really comrades were having a fear of the unknown, there will be more advantage in this new technology than where we are. But at the same time, then we can talk about adaptation, that how do we currently adapt people that are there. He's talking about 10 years, that ESCOM is talking about 10 years, that coal will still be there. And to him, there won't be that 10 years. But the question is, where is that? Are they planning this? With whom are they planning? I say ESCOM is a role player. If they don't know, they still talk about 10 years, but himself knows that there is no 10 years. We don't know. We are representing the workers that are working there. And sometimes people will then believe that we are unreasonable and all these things. And then we ask them, if you are reasonable, why are you doing this thing? Why are you doing them in the dark? Why are you hiding them? Yeah. Because you know the stakeholders that you must approach and engage them so that at least you don't create negativity. And later on, you only when you see that there is negativity, you come. That is the problem of science. There is just a lot of attitude.
Yeah. Mr. Madhi, I'm going to leave the last word with you. Unfortunately, time is against us. And I would imagine you understand the concerns that are coming from the NUM and that, you know, there are calls from not just even Sian and Energy and experts such as yourself, but perhaps the government to come and answer questions that they have. But here's a question that I want to put forward to you as somebody who understands the work of green energy a little better. Is 12.5 billion rands going to be enough? Is it going to, you know, put in the dent that is necessary in us making sure that we phase away from coal energy to green energy, or are we going to need a lot more over a longer time?
Well, it's actually embarrassing. The politicians in this country keep putting out the begging bowl. We don't need the 12.5 billion rand from outside parties. If we do this properly, it would actually stimulate industry locally. And we can actually do this without these very onerous kinds of loans. They're not always onerous, but they could be onerous, and they come with a lot of strings attached. No one just gives you 12.5 billion rand. And, you know, there's companies behind it that want then certain inroads. But I have to just comment on what was said by the member from the NUM. And I must say that green energy is never done in the dark. That's the whole point. It's always done in the light. But on a more serious note, you see, it's not the job of myself or anybody else. And I'm going to take the colleague up and actually contact him next week. And I'd wish that you guys would come back, circle back to us, and see what we've spoken about and how far we've gotten. But it's not actually our job to educate anyone. Anyone who's a responsible party in this industry needs to get off their butts and educate themselves about what's going on. Get up and open your eyes and you'll see what's going on. I don't have to tell you that this is an inevitable trend, that we are moving to decentralization, that green energy is absolutely the way to go. So, we need to get rid of this mentality as well of sitting back, calling people, saying people are using forked tongues, when you need to take the responsibility yourself to learn. And I'd be very, very happy to engage with him next Monday on this issue and see, come to common terms, in fact, on our perspective and the union's perspective.
Mr. Madhi, hopefully that can be a very constructive discussion that hopefully does come to fruition. But that's, of course, all the time we have for this discussion right now, for now at least. Thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us here on South Africa Tonight. Of course, that is the Chief Executive Officer of Sian and Energy, Mr. Mohamed Madhi, and the Deputy General Secretary of the NUM, Mr. William Mabapa.